November 4th, 2021. Our speaker today is Kevin Holdsworth, and I'd like you to tell you a little bit about him. He is a writer and an associate professor of English here at Snow College. He actually teaches on the Richfield campus, but he is able to come up today and tell us a little bit about some of his experiences as well as the books that he has written. Growing up in Salt Lake City, Kevin Holdsworth developed an early shine for outdoor recreational activity, particularly of the mountainous variety. As a teenager, feeling that the Wasatch Range was a bit overdone, he began to explore the Uinta Mountains. During 3 decades of attempts, he ascended over 40 Uinta peaks, including the 9 highest. These stories are collected in Redstone Heart. Holdsworth earned a BA in English and Philosophy from the University of Utah and an MA in English American Studies from Utah State University. He has taught at Snow College Richfield since 2011. During decades of field research, he has been dive bombed by hawks and falcons, attacked and injured by a Uinta ground squirrel, stalked by a cougar, and chased over half a mile by a rogue black bear. His books include Big Wonderful, Notes from Wyoming, and Good Water. He will be selling and signing copies of Redstone Heart immediately following his presentation. Let's give a warm welcome to Kevin Holdsworth.
Thanks, Cheryl, and thanks for all the programs, events, and films you've brought to Snow over the years. I'd like to invite you on a journey today, one of my journeys, to climb high peaks in the Uintas and write this book, Redstone Heart. They say, write what you know. That would be a very short list for me. But I do know a thing or two about going to the mountains. This was a good journey to take, although not without risks and dangers. I would encourage you to undertake journeys of your own, to wander and even to get lost, and to do so now when you were young, free, and able. I grew up in Holiday, Utah, and when I looked at the Wasatch Range from Crestview Elementary School, I thought those mountains marked the end of the world. For many in Salt Lake City, this is still the case. But from a young age, I was drawn to the mountains and explored them. My parents started me skiing at 8 because I was hyperactive and unruly. They hoped to tire me out so that I would be reverent in church on Sunday. It didn't work. But skiing did introduce me to the wider world. From the tops of the Wasatch, you could see the Uintas, a larger, more massive range in the east. And there are many other fine mountain ranges in Utah and Wyoming that we can all explore. Often my attention would turn to the Uintas. Utah is known worldwide for its fine snow and easily accessible ski resorts. The Wasatch Range that stretches from Ogden to Provo, home to 10 showy ski resorts, is surprisingly only the 5th highest mountain range in the state. The highest peak in the Wasatch, the splendid Mount Nebo, at not quite 12,000 feet, is lower than the highest peaks in the Deep Creek, Tusher, La Salle, and Uinta ranges. True, the Uintas dominate numerically and in terms of elevation, but the La Salle and Tusher ranges deserve much more respect. There are some 20 peaks in the Uintas over 13,000 feet. The 9 highest officially named are called the Notorious 9. Kings, South Kings, Gilbert, Emmons, Lavinia, Tocawana, Powell, Wasatch, and Wilson. Notorious for good reason, each of them are separated from other peaks prominent and committing. It took me 27 years to ascend them all. One could have bagged them faster, and others surely have and will. There remain a dozen other 13,000ers, all worthy and grand. There are other goals. Some of the Uinta's most rugged peaks are over 12,000 feet, but under 13,000. These are referred to as the 12,000er, and it's good to have a dozen or so in the fridge. Lamont, Osler, Beulah, Spread Eagle, Agassiz, Hayden, Cletting, A1, North Cathedral, Dead Horse, Red Knob. But who's counting? Peak baggers count. Nobody cares, so they have to have this little thing. My high school friends were lucky, in a sense, early on, to learn what was at stake. I'm going to read a little bit of a long section here. It'll be the longest thing I read. It's called The Flower and the Waterfall. High school chums, we get ourselves geared up locally at Kirkham's and Timberline Sports and start going backpacking in the Uintas. It's 1978, before your parents were born. The plan is just to fool around for a couple of hours, pack up around noon, and spend the afternoon in a leisurely walk out of the backcountry. Somebody has a wedding or something the next day, so we have to leave. We've each gone our separate ways for dawdling, the five of us, Todd, Guy, Jeffrey, myself, and Lori. We have just finished high school. We're 18. And I wanted to read this because that's the age a lot of you are or were recently. Although I had an unrequited crush on Lori 4 or 5 years before, I doubt she even noticed it. I was awkward around girls. Lori is a petite, dark, brown-eyed beauty. Nobody's honey, therefore we each devote our gentlemanly duty to her service. She likes the harmless attention, and we like it too. Todd and Jeffrey are investigating some spectacular mosses and wildflowers yonder. Lori has gone off with a book to perch on some rocks and get a little sun. Guy is ventured off, camera in hand, ready to bag some images. I stay around camp, admiring my tent, new blue, and have my journal out, ready to take down some ultra-profound thoughts about life, nature, and the nature of life. Guy is the one who finds her, crumpled on the talus near the base of a waterfall, 35 feet down. At first, he doesn't know what it is. He thinks maybe it's an old coat. But as he gets closer, he sees that it's Lori. He picks her up, carries her a couple of dozen feet to a large flat rock, checks to see that she is still breathing. She is unconscious, and runs to get us. Hey, you guys, Lori's fallen off a cliff, and you've got to come now. There is fear, even terror in his voice. We grab first aid kits and sprint to the cliff. It's some distance from camp. When we find her, we see that she's breathing shallowly and moaning. The back of her head is matted with blood. Her skin is blanched and clammy. Her arms, and especially one elbow, are scraped up, but there's nothing poking out. Her legs, too, seem okay, but one of her heels is torn up, and the ankle seems already swollen. There's blood on the rock. We know enough not to move her again, since her broken neck or back or pelvis present obvious possibilities, and the chance of internal injuries is great. We look up at the pink-gray cliffs. She fell 25, 30, 35 feet. Who knows how long she'd been laying on the talus? It couldn't have been more than 15 minutes. Why had Guy happened along just then to find her? We don't discuss any of this beyond the initial examination. She's breathing, she's not bleeding too much, no bones are poking out, but she's got internal injuries for sure. There is no, our friend is going to die now, or what do we do? With virtually no discussion, we make a plan. Guy and Jeffrey will go back to camp, grab day packs with supplies, and hike out as far and as fast as they can. Maybe they can find a ranger or someone to help. We don't discuss what kind of help will be needed, just help, evacuation of what type we do not think. We go over our location at the top of a long talus on the main inlet to Jordan Lake. We forgot to have a map, but they'll get one back at camp. This is very important, the main inlet into Jordan Lake. Above the lake on the main inlet, the main one, Jordan Lake. This is very important. In 5 minutes, they're gone. Todd and I stay with Lori. We've had some first aid training. We're Eagle Scouts, no kidding, but we've never dealt with anything like this before. Why did she fall? It doesn't make sense. It's a perfect day with no clouds. Sure, it would have been slippery on top of the waterfall, but surely she would have known enough to stay away from the edge. She's not wearing any shoes. Where are they? She awakens. Todd says, "Don't worry, we're here, Lori." "Oh, Todd," she says, "where does it hurt?" "All over," she moans. She retches. She cries and moans. There's blood on the rock and puke. She cries and moans. Her eyes are cloudy from pain. Her skin feels hot and sweaty. This is all very bad. Mercifully, she loses consciousness again. This pattern of waking, retching, crying, moaning, and falling back into her self-saving sleep is a pattern that will repeat throughout the day. I'm the gopher. We need to shade her, so I run back to get a tarp, and we set it up. Then she gets cold, so I get a sleeping bag and some pillowing clothes. Water, food, clothes, makeshift towels I fetch. I'm grateful to have something to do. The up close is hard. Todd stays right there. He will eventually become a medical doctor, and maybe this day he sees his calling. He holds her, cleans up her vomit, tries to calm her. He makes the difference. I don't like the inactivity. Just waiting and watching is awful. I feel helpless and scared. I remember my little unspoken crush, how I thought that Lori and Kay Donaldson were the hottest things around in junior high, and I was pretty sure that I tried to kiss her in the dark outside at Kay's house, and she let me, but it probably didn't mean nearly as much to her as it did to me. And now here I am with her like this, and the crush seems a little bit indecent and beside the point, because as events are developing, there's something out there on the edges tells me she's going to die. She's burning up, then she's chilled. Her insides hurt, she tells us, but she can't pee. Todd tells her just to pee her pants. Nothing, she can't. We know enough not to give her aspirin because it's obvious from her blood-matted hair that she has head wounds. We want her to drink a little lemonade or water, but she just throws it up. Todd holds her hands and says, "It'll be all right, Lori." And Lori says, "Oh, Todd." Guy and Jeffrey end up having good luck. They run into some horse people on the trail named Freckleton from Bountiful, and they tell the horse people that our friend is going to die if we can't get her out of the mountains. There is no way she can be evacuated by horse, so the Freckletons turn around and ride back to the trailhead. As a member of the local search and rescue, Mr. Freckleton has a radio in his outfit. This is decades before cell or satellite phones. And if that doesn't work, he'll drive all the way to Bear River Ranger Station and make arrangements for a helicopter rescue, because if your friend is hurt as bad as you say, that's the only way we can save her. They assure them that she's hurt that bad. She fell 35 feet. They also run into a wilderness ranger. He too has a radio. He'll check out the victim, render necessary assistance, and confirm via his radio. We don't know any of these plans until the wilderness ranger shows up. He's a young guy, not much older than we are, and he is utterly useless. We have Lori shaded, blanketed, and stabilized as best we could, he notices. He does no more than an extremely brief exam. He doesn't even touch her. Best to wait for the doctors, he says. He also tells us that he can't stand the sight of blood. In fact, he looks like he's about to faint. He retreats over to a slope where he can get radio reception, tries to make his calls, and then goes down to the shore of the lake to eat his lunch. Lori, meanwhile, is fading. Her skin is pale, shiny yellow, bluish color. Her pupils are dilated and unfocused. Her pulse is rapid and shallow. We feel certain that she has internal injuries, but there's nothing we can do. Jeffrey and Guy pass the wilderness ranger as they stagger back to camp sometime after 4 p.m. I make one last trip back to camp to fetch some ground pads to use to make an X to guide the helicopter in landing. We wait. We fret. Happy sound at last. We see the life flight chopper come over the north shoulder of Mount Agassiz. The big bird touches down on top of the cliff by the waterfall. They'd gone to the wrong place first, they said. We help the nurse and the doctor get the litter down the cliffs and Tallis and watch as they examine her. IV in just in time, they say. They slice open her shirt to attach the heart monitor. We pick her up gingerly and take her to the litter. The strapping in seems to take forever. Even with 6 of us, it's hard work to carry her up over the talus and hummocks to the chopper. She pukes partway there. We roll her over and clean it up. She cries about her stomach. And who could blame her for moaning in tears and puke, the poor little broken thing? The doc said we had been lucky. She had been lucky that we had been there and that we'd done the right things. The helicopter takes off and we wave and hug each other. She'll be in the ER in maybe 25 minutes. She'll make it, we hope. It seems like 80 miles we walked back to the trailhead that night. It's too much effort even to talk, and yet somehow we make it out, pushed on by the notion that for once, and at least once, if only a lucky once, we did the right things, and we know it. And we learn, too, that mountains can kill you in a minute. When we visit her in the hospital, some of the healthcare workers look at us suspiciously, as if we'd had a hand in how beaten up she looks. Her recovery takes months, but years later, we go backpacking together in Canyonlands. She walks with perhaps a little hitch in her get-along, but that she walks at all and wants to go backpacking is amazing. There's a little postscript. 40 years later, that's a 40. At a high school reunion after party, I share this chapter because Todd, Guy, Jeffrey, myself, and Lori are all there. We share memories and give mutual thanks that it turned out the way it did. Lori looks great, still spry and daring. She's a proud grandmother today, so that surely matters. And the rest of us, well, we're okay. The only thing she wants me to do vis-a-vis the public is to list all of her injuries for the record. The main ones include a fully fractured pelvis, 2 cracked vertebrae, a grade 3 concussion, sprained ankle and foot fracture, significant internal bruising and some lacerations of organs and tracts, and a lot of other cuts. So, early on, I guess I learned, you got to be careful. Going to the mountains is you get to walk to places that are just like that. You also get to pick the color of carpet you want. Maybe you want red. Maybe you prefer yellow. So, early on, as I say, I wanted to explore the mountains, but I didn't want to walk. I wanted to ski or climb. You might recognize this as the Great Salt Lake City flood from 1983, when State Street was a river. It's always great to climb a peak and look down on the Uintas. Oops, who's that? So I had to find some friends. I had a lot to offer, although I lacked direction. One of the things I did have was a great fashion sense. Started climbing peaks in the Wasatch, climbing up for obvious reasons. Skiing down. A lot faster to go down that way. Swimming across a lake in late May is cold. But you end up seeing things you don't see otherwise. This chapter is called Dirt Bags, which refers to itinerant climbers. I find my band. I'd like to begin with my hair, the way I feel about my hair. Hair is in the air. Hair is everywhere. It's the 1980s. While at the Norwegian University of Utah, I encounter a variety of like-minded souls. We meet on outdoor program trips, in the dorms, at parties, at trailheads. Pretty soon we have a regular gang. We decide to form a band, but not a hair band and not a boy band. Well, singing is the gateway, or at least vocalizing. Singing, you see, increases the esprit de corps, and you can't deny it. We sing irreverent songs when we drive to hikes or tours or climbs. We sing during downtime for no good reason. When the mojo is working, we croon. We sing while skiing, using our two poles as double-neck guitars if we want to play Stairway if necessary. We sing mainly rock and roll, but sometimes we are the Temptations, and sometimes we are the Pips. Now and then we noodle along with prog rock and consider concept albums. In a moment of shocking punk immaturity, we call ourselves the Dead Babies. Wait, let me explain. It's only because we had found a sacred amulet, a cute little baby doll, in the parking lot at Harmon's Grocery on our first expedition in 1981. We were searching for identity. Good wine takes a long time to age. With willing accomplices, it becomes easy to scare up someone in winter to go and find some backcountry poofter to furrow. Spring means doing the same and peak bagging. Summer involves backpacking or river trips. Fall is a shoulder season, trips to the desert or high country until the flakes fly, our idealized calendar. A little dark, sorry. He's wearing two backpacks. You want to find friends who will share the load, who are willing to fight if necessary. We can fish. This is Lizard Man, a military brat who had lived many places. After his time at the Norwegian University, he went off to Alaska and didn't come back. This is Mark Alpenglow, who hailed from Buffalo, New York. While most of the Dead Babies are introverted, Mark can be encouraged to be very outgoing. By nature, he displays an outspoken mien common to many of the Empire State persuasion. His opinions he is not shy to share. There he is waving at an elk. Very friendly guy. What he lacks in experience and natural skills, balance, judgment, route finding, turning ability, he makes up with mania and summit drive. He becomes the permanent interim president of the Peak a Week Club and seeks to live up to its name, 1 week, 1 peak. The elusive Larry Darkness. Very fine dirt skiing. Larry Darkness in his prime was like the wind. No one could keep up with him, and he wouldn't wait for anyone. This is a good characteristic for a solo climber. Stories of him in the Larry like the wind mode were many. A favorite takes place in the Red Rock country. On the way down from the anthill, a bristlecone-topped, two-hued sandstone peak just south of Thousand Lake Mountain in Wayne County, Larry got ahead of the rest of us. There's nothing unusual about that. We followed his tracks that eventually led to the edge of a cliff. We looked all around to try to figure out how he'd gone down, but we couldn't. So to be safe, we traversed right over to some boulders and down to a sandy flat. We started heading northeast across the sandy flat, and soon we came upon his tracks. We looked back and were able to see that there was indeed a steep, narrow gully that would have led directly down from the cliff, from the ledge we had been on, a very steep, straight, and very Larry gully. We cursed Larry by himself as we had lost half an hour in our safer detour. As we continued walking, we soon noticed that right on top of Larry's tracks, easily visible in the soft sand, were mountain lion tracks. Quite large and extremely fresh, Puma sign, the tracks of a mountain lion that was stalking Larry by himself as he walked across the sandy flat, not 20 minutes ahead of us. Looking at the minutes-old tracks of a fully grown, mature, adult, veteran, gigantic, supersized cougar, we imagined that he or she might be sampling the stringy Larry just now, ripping him open easily, gizzard to yin-yang, gnawing upon rich internal organs and coating cat whiskers with fresh, warm human blood. We pictured the cougar as it soundlessly charged him on the reddish sand and pounced again, and brought him down, tossed him around like a puppy with a sock in his mouth, and then went for the arterial, or tore Larry's head clean off. Needless to say, once we figured this out, we started to make a lot of noise. Cougars are afraid of noise. We threw rocks and sang just to make sure that that cat took off. So to get away from the crowds and bugs, it's very nice to go in the spring or the early winter. It should be no mystery why there weren't any women with us. Women we often thought of diligently, respectfully, and we spoke of their many qualities with much adoration. And we tried to get closer to share our feelings with them, but had only slim luck in bringing love interests along for adventures for really obvious reasons. We try and learn that doing something somewhat less gnarly with potential amorous friends is a better strategy than trying to kill someone on a date. For many weeks in the summers of 1986 and 1987, Dr. Alpenglow and I find time to bag peaks and nothing else. We go on a spree. We engage in a peak bagging extravaganza and overdo it in the Uintas. We do it for fun and because too much of real life is littered with stupid boundaries, beset with crevasses of conformity. We bag peaks like there is no tomorrow. Problem was, we ended up getting to the top in lightning storms a lot, often in the darkness. Well, one time we ran into the lost Inca city of Machu Picchu in the eastern Uintas. It's very strange. September. Hard to make out, but I can't do that now. To me, this shot shows the things we did when we were young and foolish. You can see the clouds building in the west, and it won't be long until they're right on top of us and it's snowing, which can make for tricky footing. And there's the Matterhorn. You run into that in the eastern Uintas as well. New blue. The journey to write this book took several years for a variety of reasons. It ends with the ascent of Lavinia, my nemesis, in 2007. That's the peak on this screen over there. I turned around twice, once on the left side at the pass because of bad weather, once going straight up in June because I was afraid. The last time I went from the right, but we went down that beautiful gully that you can see right of the summit. What did I learn? Well, I learned sometimes it takes 3 times to get to the top. Get an early start. The summit is only halfway. It's good to be lucky. Of my 3 main companions, 2 are dead, and 1 went back to Ithaca. That leaves me to tell a story. The best places are off trail, but you usually need to take a trail to reach them. Usually you bring too much food. Sometimes you don't bring enough. Every time you undertake a journey to bag a peak, you have to prove to yourself that you know what you're doing. In this way, climbing peaks is like writing. And so today, I would encourage you, each one of you, to undertake your own journey when you're young and free. And the best journeys may have a goal, but along the way, there is no way of knowing what you might find. You may hope that it ends up where it started, but if it doesn't, you'll remember it more. In the end, it's really best to know that you really got out there. Thanks. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Uh, there are more people on a few of the trails. The one in Henry's Fork that goes to Kings Peak. But it's such a big area. I know a lot of thru hikers do the Highline Trail, but it just didn't ever seem like we ran into anybody because we were off trail and way up there. I know there's more use, but I didn't notice it. That's the great thing about the Uintas, it's so large you can really get lost. Question? Richfield is south of here. It's about an hour. That's where I teach. Ever heard of Richfield?
I was just wondering what inspired you to write down all your stories and what's been the most gratifying part of having all of those in writing.
Well, at some point I wanted to record the stories because they seemed at least interesting to me. And it also gave me a reason to keep doing it. It's like, well, okay, you need a goal. You got to finish these 9 peaks or whatever. And once you do, you can write about it. And I knew that I was, going to write about it. So I suppose it was self-conscious and somewhat self-serving. But the gratifying part is to have written it down because, again, I'm alone now. And I wanted to record those people. Maybe I spent too much time living in the past and writing about people who aren't around anymore, but it was a way to record the things that we did.
So, my dad hiked the Uintas on the Highline Trail, and he did that alone. And he got mountain sickness the first time, and so we had to send up a crew to go get him because he just went alone. But then the second time he went with a group, and they got over the trail, and I think they went to Kings Peak as well. But for his first instance, in that situation, he didn't have any tracking or anything for how we could find him. So what would be the best way that you if you ever went on a solo trip again, in the Uintas, what's the best tracking for other people to find you if you went alone?
Don't go on a solo trip. I did, and I knew that if I messed up, that would be it. If you're going to go up by yourself, stay on a trail where someone might find you if you get into any trouble. It's just better to go with somebody. If you're not convinced, read the book about Aaron Ralston, who got his hand stuck in a crack, had to cut off his arm because he was alone. I mean, it's thrilling. The other thing is that for me, being in bear country, the Uintas is not so much, but when you're by yourself, that squirrel that you hear in the middle of the night, you think is a grizzly bear that's going to come over and tear your head off. So you're nervous and jumpy and you don't sleep that well. Yeah, so altitude sickness hits everybody, particularly if you're going from sea level to 10,000 feet. Those, living here where you're a mile high, it'll take a few days to acclimate. You probably won't get altitude sickness, but it usually hits on the second and third day if you've come from a very low elevation and go above 10,000 feet. It feels like the flu, really bad case of the flu, and the headache doesn't go away till you go to a lower elevation.
Questions? Okay, let's thank Kevin. And if you are interested in purchasing his book or coming to talk with him, please come.